Hey, it's me, Destin. Welcome to the second channel here, Smarter Every Day 2. So this is the companion video to the main channel video about EBR-1, Experimental Breeder Reactor 1. This is the first nuclear power plant in the world to produce power for civilian use. It's a really cool thing. So that video, I highly recommend watching it. Andrew, our tour guide, took us around the whole facility, explained how everything worked. I built some silly models that I think you'll enjoy. So if you haven't watched that main channel video, I recommend it before watching this. This is the stuff that fell on the cutting room floor. Didn't quite make the main channel video, but I think you'll really enjoy it if you're a nerd like me and you want to go deeper into the details. So before we get started, I want to say thank you to everyone that supports Smarter Every Day on Patreon, patreon.com/smartereveryday. That's a huge deal. You let me make the videos I want to make, and I'm grateful. It's a really big deal. Also, I'm doing a whole series on nuclear power. It's the nuclear power deep dive here on Smarter Every Day. And if you want to be notified when I upload a new video in the series, go sign up for email updates. So if you go to smartereveryday.com/email list, I'll put a link down in the video description. I will send you an email like the old school days when I upload a new video so that you can know that it's up there and you can go check it out. Because I don't really trust the YouTube notification system. I think that's a really cool way for us to connect. So email list, thank you to patrons, and let's go learn more about EBR-1. Interested people are interesting, and you're very interesting.
I appreciate that.
Yeah. So what do we have here?
So once they pull the fuel rod out of the reactor, they'd have to clean the liquid metal coolant off of it. That would happen in the basement just below these discs. Each of these silver discs lines up to a manhole and a pipe in the basement. They'd feed the spent rods down into those pipes and flush them with a solution of acetone and alcohol to clean them off. Once they were clean, they'd have to use the secondary cask right here to pull them out of the basement. They can't use the same cask as before. That cask still has some liquid metal inside of it, so they'll use a clean cask, they'll pull them out of the basement and store them here on the rod farm. This is where they would be stored for long-term storage while they physically cooled down.
So they could just chill here?
Yep, it's basically a giant block of concrete to act as shielding.
Is that a real sign? Is that active for today?
Yep, that's a modern sign.
Okay.
So there are a couple of areas in here that are fixed radiological areas. The secondary heat exchanger is one of those, which means they do have contamination. This is probably one of the more contaminated areas, but it's all completely closed up, so none of that radiation can escape and get out here.
I see.
And this is where they would just store the rods while they physically cooled down. It would take a while. In modern facilities, they have these in deep water trenches.
I want to see this. What is this?
This is the hot cell, first of its kind. This allows us to operate on those spent fuel rods safely. The walls are made of 4 feet of high density concrete. The windows are made of 4 feet of leaded glass. The lead that's trapped in the glass lattice acts as shielding. And these mechanical manipulator arms on the outside would allow us to control the arms on the inside. Normally there'd be a handle on the bottom so you could grasp with the hands on the inside, but they had to take those off because kids kept messing with them. But this is the first set of mechanical manipulator arms ever built. At the Hot Fuels Examination Facility, our new version of this, they take 18 months to train on. I can't imagine how long it would have taken these operators. But once they figured it out, you can essentially do anything in that room you can on the outside with your hands. It'll just take more time depending upon how much finesse the action requires.
So they could do things like take those beakers off, the lids off those beakers and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Please not play with it. So this was a really cool museum exhibit until it wasn't, until it got abused, right?
No kidding. I think it's still beautiful.
Have you gotten to do it?
No, unfortunately not. Not for these particular arms.
Oh, I'm sorry for you, Andrew. I know that hurts.
But these windows are pretty cool.
Yeah,
At the time, they did not know how to produce thick panes of leaded glass. So to get 4 feet of shielding, they had to stack 34 panes of 1.5 inch thick glass. Then, in between each layer, they filled it with mineral oil that matches the refractive index of the glass so you can see straight through. But it gives you a pretty cool effect if you shine a flashlight on it.
Oh, does it do like an infinite kind of thing?
It's something similar.
Oh, that is cool.
Shows you each of those layers.
That's really cool. Can you kind of angle it?
Oh, which way?
Like you can't shoot it at an angle. It's only it's internal reflection.
Mm-hmm. On the left side here, where we used to have a bit of an oil leak back in the day, the leak's been solved, but it gives you a pretty cool effect due to the oxidation of the various oils.
Oh, so different layers are different colors. That's cool.
And then,
I can see the oil.
Mm-hmm.
Is that the top of the oil?
Yep. That's where we were able to stop the leak, I suppose.
I see.
Then behind us, we have one of the few mistakes they made building this facility, a giant hole in the wall.
Yeah?
They forgot they'd have to take these arms off to repair them. There simply was not enough room to do that. When they realized that was an issue, they proposed a pretty simple solution. Let's knock a hole in the wall. It works just fine. I mean, this wasn't a load-bearing section of the wall, so they could knock a hole in it. That way, whenever they have to repair the arms, they can take the wall apart, get the arms off to repair them, and put everything back together again.
That's awesome. That's pretty fun. So what would they do in there? Would they work with the rods?
Two main things. They were very curious to know what the uranium was splitting into, so they would perform some chemistry in there. They didn't know if it was splitting into a specific set of elements or a whole range of elements, so that's part of what they did in there. But mostly that was used as a shipping facility. They'd chop the rods up, package them in radiation-proof packaging. That way they could be sent away to be recycled. Unlike almost any reactor to come after this, we used weapons-grade uranium, 90% enriched. You only split 5% of it before it loses reactivity, so you'd want to recycle the rest. That's a lot of usable uranium. So this was mostly used as a shipping facility so they could get it sent away safely.
Oh, wow. And so behind you here, is this how they would keep up with the different rods?
Yep, I always tell people they had a very advanced system for keeping track of it. A chalkboard.
Works, man. Empty pipe. Is this the way it was left? I mean, obviously you probably don't have a rod in there.
Yeah, this is the way it was left. I'm pretty sure they did clean all the rods out, but they left it there just for posterity so people can get an idea of how it was set up and how they would mark it all down.
That's so cool.
It's kind of a unique system in that you don't have to have anybody there while it's turned off. It's a completely benign system when it's turned off. So the outside breeding blanket is going to go through a pretty intense heat cycle. Every night it would bring itself back down to room temperature, and in the morning when they started the reactor back up, it would raise in temperature to core temperature. That means you're going to have defects in that outside blanket over time. That's a pretty big heat cycle. So
what's the blanket made of again? Remind me.
It's uranium-238, and I think it had an outside of stainless steel.
Okay, got it. So you would get defects over time.
Yep, and these two rooms were made to inspect for defects and repair the defects.
Wow, okay.
So we'll go in here, watch your head when you stand up. There are a couple of short spaces on the inside.
Okay. All right. It's very echoey in here, and those are some really big lamps. What's up with that?
Well, if you probably noticed, these windows block a fair amount of light coming through them.
I see.
They had to perform the inspection from the other side. They'd be controlling everything outside of that window. So they had to have very bright lights to give you enough to actually see what the cracks / warping is when they're operating that procedure for maintenance.
So that would hold the breeding blanket?
Yep, they'd open up this bay door that goes into the reactor room. They'd send in the big U-shaped grabbing device to grab the 8,500 pound blanket. They'd bring it back in here, set it down on this turntable in the center, and then slowly turn the turntable and inspect it for any defects.
With a worm gear. How would they inspect it? Like they're looking through that window right there.
From this window behind me.
This window, okay. Which is why the lamps are on that side.
Yep.
Okay.
They also have a mirror across on the ceiling. That essentially acts as a second set of eyes. You lose a lot of depth perception looking through this thick glass, so that would help them orient the machinery in the 3D environment. Otherwise, you can't tell exactly where the machinery is due to the warping from the thick glass.
Okay.
So they bring it in here, they'd set the blanket down. If there were any warps or cracks, they'd pick the blanket back up and send it to the next room using the tracks on the ceiling. That would be the repair room. Unfortunately, there's not much to see in there. They basically took all of the repair equipment out, so not much to see, but you can take a look at it through a window when we go over to the other side.
That's cool. Have you taken mechanics and materials yet?
Oh, absolutely.
Okay, so you appreciate that like I do. Like the amount of force that little lip is taking, it's hard to see.
A lot of shear force as well.
Absolutely, it's incredible. That's awesome.
All right, next we'll go around, see the other side of the window where they'd operate these machines and take a look at some systems they have holes cut in for us to look at.
What is this?
I'm not entirely sure. I think this may have been one of the parts that would allow them to pull particular bricks out, but I can't say with any certainty.
That makes sense. Yeah, I mean, let's see, we have some type of, I don't know.
A lot of this is a black box because it's not exactly easy to find documentation on the individual parts.
Because was it classified at the time?
Oh yeah, there are a couple of documents I found online, and all over them they've got secret crossed out and they've got declassified on the cover, so it was very top secret at the time.
Oh wow. No, so you have dosimeters everywhere.
Got to make sure the public's safe. Yeah, there are a couple of spots of fixed contamination up to about 2,000 counts per minute, which is much less than even a house's smoke detector, so it's all well within safe levels, but we keep the dosimeters up just to make sure everything remains safe.
Do you wear one?
I don't need to wear one personally.
Okay, interesting. So this is where they would inspect the blanket.
Yeah, the window on the right is for the repair room. The window on the left is to actually get it inspected. If you spin this, you can see the turntable spin very, very slowly.
Oh, you're actually turning it.
It's down geared a lot. That job would not be particularly fun.
No, not at all. So this is the control panel that a person would use when they are inspecting that blanket. You're turning that thing, and that's actually turning that turntable that we were looking at earlier. That's cool. So it's a linkage all the way. Can you feel the friction in the linkage?
Oh yeah.
That's pretty cool.
So if we come back here to the corner, we'll take a look at the primary heat exchanger. You can only get a good view of it from back here. So you stand right around here and point your camera up through that upper window. So that big tank up there is the primary heat exchanger. It would exchange heat between the first 2 loops of liquid metal. It's a lot smaller than the entire room we have for a secondary exchanger, simply because there doesn't need to be an argon jacket. It's liquid metal to liquid metal, so it's much more spatially efficient.
That's awesome. Talking about the dosimeters, what is the hottest area in EBR1 right now?
I'm certain that within the reactor or some other decommissioned areas, there are probably higher counts, but as far as areas we can access, it only gets up to 2,000 counts per minute.
I mean, so yeah, I guess it would make sense that the reactor itself would be the most.
So then one thing to look at is through this lower window.
This one?
This is a receiving tank for coolant that's cooling the reactor. This is very close as far as the pipe systems are considered. This is very close to the reactor. This acts as something of a thermal battery. If the reactor begins producing a bunch of excess heat, it will travel down into the drain tank. So this is a thermal battery to help prevent emergencies, but it's not foolproof. They would still have to scram it if the heat coefficient rose too quickly. With the earlier core, there were 2 dominating effects for the heat coefficient. One of those was the bowing of the actual rods themselves, and for the most part, that was not the dominating force. But if they slowed coolant, or if they slowed the coolant, that would become the dominating factor, and it would overheat.
Yeah. Huh. So the heat at which that's interesting. The heat at which they would bring it up and take it down mattered because of the dissimilar materials. Is that true?
Essentially, and they also had to make sure they were always pumping enough coolant through. Otherwise, you'd get differential thermal expansion that would cause bowing in the rods.
Got it. Is this a modern sign?
Yep. And that's one of the old access tunnels.
That's cool. Man, I love that lamp. Isn't that cool? Is that original?
Yep.
It's beautiful.
Even the replacement parts have to be time period original. It gives the facility manager quite a challenge.
I can imagine. It's incredible because it's a historic site, right?
Mm-hmm.
Is it bad that I didn't even know this existed?
No, that's normal. I mean, we're out here in Idaho for a reason. That was part of why we're out here, was for secrecy.
Oh, that makes sense.
Especially back in the day.
We going up?
That's essentially all of EBR1, so if there's anything specific you'd like to talk about, we'll return to that area. Or if you want to talk to the heater, or talk about the heater engines outside, we can go talk about those.
The heater engines?
Yep.
Oh, the nuclear airplane?
Yep.
Yep, let's go.
All right.
Let's do it. Let's do it. Okay, this might sound dumb, but it's fun. So, you know all this stuff I made for the main channel video? I can turn it on and stuff does things. This took an incredible amount of time to make, and I'm a little sad because I don't know what else to use it for. So this is what I've thought about. I am constantly trying to think of ways to express my gratitude to people that support on Patreon at patreon.com/smartereveryday. I cannot imagine a situation in which you would want to 3D print the heat exchange system for EBR1. However, like this print right here, that took like 6 hours on a Formlabs Form 4. I printed, like you should have seen, I didn't record a lot of that. I got some footage here, I'll show you. It took an incredible amount of time to get this right, and then I would have to change it and then print it again. It's awesome, but I really am sad that it's not going to be used again. So what I would like to do is give you, the patrons of Smarter Every Day, if you support on Patreon, I would like to give you all these 3D files because I think they're fun. It's kind of silly too. I've also got these files, like the elements and stuff, like the turbines here and the pumps and stuff like that. I've got the 3D files and I would love to give them to you. I look forward to seeing any of the prints you decide to make, but it'd be cool. I did this on a Prusa XL, I think I already said that. But anyway, it's really fun stuff. So this is a way of expressing my gratitude to everybody that supports at patreon.com/smartereveryday. I'm constantly trying to figure out things to give the patrons, but the patrons understand it's not transactional. Like I get messages from time to time saying, hey, just go make the next video. And that's what I'm trying to do. But I still want to say thank you. So thank you so much to everybody that supports on Patreon at patreon.com/smartereveryday. I'm going to give you the 3D files for the EBR1 heat exchanger and you know, all the little elements and stuff if you want to print those out and like make a magnet and put it on your fridge or something. Anyway, thank you so much. I'm grateful to all your support. So how long have you been working here, Andrew?
I worked here last summer as an intern. They're only open for 3 months during the summer. This is my second year out, so about 5.5 total.
Okay, that's cool. It's cool. Do you love it?
I absolutely love it. Outreach is an important thing to me. And a lot of people come in here a little bit afraid of nuclear energy and they leave understanding it a lot more.
What is this?
This is kind of a black box.
What do you mean by that?
On the left, we have the backup power generator. The exhaust is connected to this. I'm not sure for what purpose.
Don't know what it does.
I really couldn't tell you. None of the training materials told me anything about this particular part, and I can't figure it out.
It looks like a muffler. So there's the diesel generator. There's the diesel engine.
Yeah, so this would power it if they had an emergency and before they got the reactor set up.
What is this?
That is a test cask for the 3 Mile Island transportation cask.
They were just testing to see if they could rupture it?
Yep.
Yep. That's a good thing to test.
No kidding.
All right, so let's figure this out. Diesel engine, generator, exhaust manifold. I don't know, muffler? What do you think?
I have no idea. Like I said, it's a very strange system. I've had a lot of people come in here and try to troubleshoot it, but no definitive answers yet.
Combustion, Superior Combustion Industries, rotary burner. So I wonder if this is oh shoot, they have a word for when you burn your combustion gases.
Is it catalytic converter?
You're right, catalytic converter. I wonder if this is a big one.
Yeah, I've heard that that's one of the leading theories, and it makes sense to me.
Well, it's putting the gases in there. It's just burning all of it, maybe.
Okay.
It's a guess, I don't know. And then this tank, any ideas?
Yep, this is the fuel tank.
Oh, I see. Amazing. That's cool, man.
All right, out to the heater reactors.
Well, yeah. One really interesting thing that happened at EBR1 is toward the end of the life of the reactor, they decided to do some tests. And some of the people that were working on the reactor, they knew that a partial meltdown could have happened. So they mailed, like old school memo, they sent a letter to Argonne National Lab, who managed the whole thing. And they said, hey, we want to do some tests. There's the possibility of a partial meltdown. Can we proceed? And they said, yes, you can proceed. And a partial meltdown did occur. Now, when we think nuclear power plant meltdown, we think, oh my goodness, the world's ending. 100 miles around this, you can't go there. It was not quite like that. It was a partial meltdown, and it was very safe the way they did it because there was a lot of safety systems built into EBR1. So I thought it was really interesting. Andrew's going to tell us how that meltdown occurred, and then after that, I found some archive video from Argonne about how they tried to recover the uranium from the fuel rods, and it's fascinating. So they have that video. Let's go watch it.
And back in '55, nearing the end of the facility's expected lifespan, they wanted to run an experiment because they weren't sure exactly what was going on with the temperature coefficient of the reactor. It appeared to be negative, which is what you want for a reactor. But when they decreased fluent flow, they noticed that the reactivity would increase more than they were expecting. So in 55, they ran an experiment to see what exactly was happening. They shut the pumps off for a moment, the power levels rose, and they had a partial meltdown. They could have prevented the partial meltdown by doing a quick scram, but there was a bit of confusion and they did the slow scram instead. It did partially melt down, but that wasn't a huge issue. It was not a safety concern. They got it shut down safely, but they learned some interesting things. There was a plate that was holding in position all the fuel rods, and the different thermodynamic expansion of the rods had caused them to bow because the plate wasn't expanding at the same rate. And because of that, it increased reactivity to a point that they couldn't necessarily stop it in time.
Okay. Case of emergency, scram. What does scram mean? The name scram derives from the 1942 at Chicago Pile 1, the world's first nuclear reactor. The safety control rod axeman, or scram.
And that wasn't just anybody operating that scram system.
That was the one in Chicago.
So,
oh wait, no, the Chicago Pile was here, wasn't it?
No, that was in Illinois. They built their first reactor in a squash court under the football stadium at the University of Chicago. It was operated using a single central control rod hanging from a rope and a pulley above the reactor. They'd pulley the rod up to start the reactor up, pulley it back down in to shut it down, and it was tied off to a catwalk above the reactor. That's not a system that's particularly easy to use in an emergency, so they took one of the PhD physicists working there and stuck him up on the catwalk to babysit the rope. His entire job was to stand there and wait for anybody to sound the alarm. If they did, he had an axe, and he was meant to chop the rope, dropping the control rod and shutting down the reactor.
So he was the safety control rod axeman. That's awesome. I love it.
And in a modern facility, they'll tell you it's safety control rod actuator mechanism, which is definitely more technically accurate, but that story is completely true.
Let's be real. It's just the axe man. That's great.
On November 29, 1955, this reactor was subjected to a power surge which reached a probable peak value of 9 megawatts. Following this incident, which resulted in some melting of the fuel elements, a temporary cave was constructed above the reactor tank to receive the highly radioactive core assembly as it was withdrawn from the reactor. With the core assembly out of the reactor tank, the hexagonal can surrounding the fuel elements was removed, along with about 1/4 of the fuel elements. The molten core alloy had extruded into the coolant channels and solidified into a mass surrounding the fuel section. The solidified material was heavily covered with oxides of NaC, sodium-potassium alloy. The pyrophoric nature of the damaged core was aggravated by the presence of entrained NaC, and after several small fires were experienced, it was decided to transfer the core to Argonne National Laboratory near Chicago.
This video is fascinating. The meltdown occurred here, and so there's NaC everywhere. And so once they sent it over to Argonne, they had to get the NaC off of the core, and then they had to try to capture all the nuclear material because they wanted to reprocess it and reuse it. It's a fascinating engineering problem, and they had to do a lot of the stuff remotely, and so they used these really cool grippers to try to position the core, and sometimes they would just pull on the thermocouple wires to get parts of it apart. It's a fascinating problem-solving thing that they had to do, and it's fascinating. So go check it out. I think I said fascinating twice there. Whatever, second channel, nobody cares. Go check it out on Argonne's YouTube channel. It's amazing. I'll leave a link down in the video description. You should totally watch this video. Very cool stuff. Hey, give me some propaganda over here real quick.
All right.
Tell me this. Tell me why INL is so important. I want to hear it from you.
So basically, ever since we came out here, we've had a huge economic impact on Eastern Idaho. Especially when you're in elementary school, everybody has a friend whose dad works out at the lab. They can't tell you exactly what he does, but generally speaking, those families are pretty well off, and the INL grants them that ability. You really wouldn't have these sort of, I guess, upper educational opportunities out here in Idaho without the INL. We're not only for engineers, we have 5,500 employees, and that covers basically the whole spectrum of degrees. So we have environmental engineers out here, environmental sciences, we've got surveyors and other people who are trying to take care of the land. They basically perform every kind of science you can imagine.
Where are you going to school, Andrew?
Out at Idaho State University in Pocatello. Most of my professors work out here at the lab, so it works out fine.
So you can go get some tutoring at lunch?
Yep.
That's awesome. All right, so we're gonna go see a nuclear airplane engine. Is that what I understand?
Yes, sir. So this is one of those pieces of history that really makes you question if everybody had their heads screwed on straight back in the 50s.
Okay.
So in 1947, essentially right after the World War, they planned on using nuclear power to power an airplane. For a very similar reason that we wanted to power our submarines using that technology. You can have it operational a lot longer if it's a nuclear fuel. In 55, they first test fired a reactor that's meant to power a jet turbine. It would be connected to just an off-the-shelf J-47 jet turbine, and these are those 2 reactors here.
Okay.
On the left, we have HTRE-2. This was the first test reactor. It's in an upright state because it was much easier for them to take a look at everything and get in there and screw around with parts that way.
Yeah.
While on the right, it's in a horizontal configuration. That's the configuration they would have been flying with, so it's much more compact.
Is it so these are both the same engine?
They're the first...
Or reactor?
Yes, similar reactor designs. The right has just modified it, made parts smaller. That way it's actually ready to fly in a plane.
It's amazing. So this is a reactor or an engine. What is this?
It is essentially a reactor that is performing the same function as fuel for a jet engine.
Okay.
So this just provides heat for the air. That way when it's leaving, you've got thrust because it's had a lot of kinetic energy added to it. In 55, they first powered on HTRE-1. They tested it a few times, added some modifications to it. Then it was turned into HTRE-2. The second iteration was kind of used as a materials test reactor. They had a materials test reactor out here already, but it didn't have a space big enough to test parts for the third iteration. So they cut a hexagonal hole in the top of this reactor and used it as a materials test reactor for a time.
Is this how it was going to work?
More or less. It would have been the biggest plane ever to exist. The hangar they built for at the time was the largest concrete structure in the world.
Dude, that's awesome looking. So good looking. Oh, look at the engine, man. Look at it.
There is a couple of downsides to this system.
It looks great. Let's be honest.
Oh, it does.
Yes. It also looks crazy, but
one of the biggest issues is you're intaking atmospheric air into the turbine. It would pass through the reactor to be heated up and sent back through the other end of the jet engine, which means certain constituents of the air, like argon, would become activated, meaning that this would be spewing radiation as it flew, and that's one of the reasons they shut the project down.
that's the moronic part of it.
Yep.
I mean, they were innovators, man. They were trying.
Without a doubt.
They were, and this right here, okay, clearly they figured out it was bad. Cancels the nuclear bomber program effective immediately. Okay.
And the strange thing is, they spent $1 billion getting the 2 engines built and ready to go. By the time they were ready to get a plane built, they only needed 200 million more. Only 200 million more. In the 50s, that was a ton of money.
Yeah.
But they decided, essentially because the ballistics missile program was starting, that it wasn't necessary to have a plane loaded with nuclear weapons flying all the time, so they shut the program down to focus on the ballistic missile program.
Got it. My grandfather actually worked for the ABMA, the Army Ballistic Missile Agency. I think that's what it was called. It's cool. So this just exists out here in the middle of Idaho, and you can see it. I don't know if you're going to be working here at the time, Andrew, but if you are, they can come talk to you, right?
Absolutely.
Andrew, it was a pleasure, dude. It was awesome, man.
By the way, I've loved your content for a long time. I'm a big fan.
Dude, I'm a real big fan of you, man. You're awesome. Let's go here in the light so let's take a selfie in front of a nuclear.
That would be awesome.
Yeah, let's do that.
Yeah, you're actually a big inspiration for why I took this job in the first place. Science outreach is really important to me because of people like you.
Whatever, dude. You're an inspiration to me. Andrew, you're the boss. You got a phone? Wanna
Absolutely.
take a selfie?
Let's do it.
It's great. Oh, look at that. That's so good.
Thank you so much.
All right, so this is Andrew. This is EBR1, right?
Yes, sir.
Thank you so much, man. Really
You're
appreciate
welcome.
it. All right, I hope you enjoyed this video on Smarter Every Day 2, the second channel. If you're not subscribed to the second channel, feel free to consider that. I would prefer you sign up for the email list if that's something you're interested in. I would be grateful for that. Also, a huge thank you to everybody that supports Smarter Every Day on Patreon. That is what, I can't explain how important that is, because it decouples me from all kinds of algorithmic stuff that happens on the internet, and it lets me make really silly videos. Like, for example, this thing right here. Do you know that it would have been way easier to make an animation? That would have been way easier, but I just really wanted to do it this way because I think that was really cool. So this is the kind of stuff I do with Patreon support, and if you would like to do that, I would be grateful. Patreon.com/smartereveryday. Anyway, that's it. I hope you enjoyed this video, and I'm excited to learn more about nuclear power with you because I am learning a ton. I'm Destin. You're getting smarter every day. Thanks. That's so funny. The memory card ran out right as I was saying bye. So I'm Destin. You're getting smarter every day. Have a good one. Bye.